and she has been a researcher and educator and now works as a therapist. Professor Clinton Hutton, as a former professor at the University of the West Indies, specializes in Caribbean political philosophy and culture and aesthetics. Clinton's research focuses on history, Caribbean, African diaspora culture, including creativity and the creative arts, cosmology, spirituality, and philosophy. We also have Janai Jaja, who is an award-winning photographer and Jamaica's first Rastafari photographer in that genre space. His work has been published in various books, album covers for some of reggae's most prolific artists, including Bob Marley, I Trees, Third World, Peter Tosh, to name a few. These are our slated speakers. We have apologies. We had previously advertised Petrona Morris as well as Brother Miguel Lorne. Both of them are sending apologies. They're not able to join us. But I know that they're here with us in spirit and in truth. I am going to now invite my brother and my friend. I trust the tech persons can accommodate that. Am I correct? Can we take the Professor Clinton Hutton, or are we not yet able to do so?
You can go ahead.
All right. So I'd like to invite Professor Clinton Hutton, himself a visual artist and a photographer, as well as an academic philosopher, to help us to understand the man we celebrate today from his own perspective. And I'm sure you have much to share with us, Clinton. So the floor is yours, and thank you once more, Professor Hutton.
Greetings. Thank you very much. Ras Daniel Heartman, born in the early 1940s, and in fact, born during the same period of time as Marley, Peter Tosh, Bonnie Whaler, Jimmy Cliff, and others who have played a significant role in the making and articulation of Jamaican popular music and its aesthetic complex. I would locate Ras Daniel Heartman in that tradition. The sonic tradition in music, he represents the visual tradition in that aesthetic complex. Ras Daniel Heartman in the 1960s and in the 1970s into the 1980s became one of the best known Jamaican visual artists. In fact, I would go as far as to state that his work, the distribution of his work and knowledge of his work supersede all the other Jamaican visual artists at the time. His work is known globally and have been used in a number of ways. They have been used on T-shirts, which the other artists were not doing at the time. Right? So his mode of showing his work in that sense was different. So on T-shirts, on flags, album covers, journals, a number of journals, academic journals, coming out of the United States and the Caribbean and Africa, actually showcase his works inside, but more importantly, on the covers of several of those journals. So he was widely known, as I stated, the best known Jamaican visual artist globally. And he represents the visual expression of the creative ethos of Rastafari. Certainly, Jamaican popular music, recorded music, from ska to reggae and various attendant forms, as in the works of the disc jockey, as they were initially called, and called so from coming from out of the sound system, as selectors, firstly in the person of Count Machuki, and then off to two of the persons that he was mentored to, King Stitt and U. Roy, that Heartman, while he represented the visual side, and there are less persons that you can point to as agency of visual art at the time. Nonetheless, his role was significant, and he was part of the creative uprising, if you will, of the Rastafari movement in terms of the expressions, the articulation of various themes, various feelings, various philosophical expressions, which make him really a central person, which is up to now not really recognized as such. And a central person, not just in the articulation of Rastafari, but of Jamaicans and of Pan-Africanists globally. And for that, I welcome this meeting and conversation, these conversations about Ras Daniel Heartman. But he is best located in the cultural, philosophical uprising of the Rastafari movement, which played a significant role. Let us remember Count Ozzy. Let's remember the Rastafari, the Comsum, and then Locks Rastafari in the founding of the Scatterlights, the best cabin and the best set of Jamaican musicians at the time. Is only, that is Heartman, to be located in that. And from ska to rocksteady, and ultimately to reggae music, that the agency of Rastafari in that uprising is central. There are other visual artists Jalani mentioned Everett Brown, for example, and his paintings, but for me, his works in relation to the creation of musical instruments. Musical instrument with works of art shaping it and covering it is very, very important. But we have the influence of Rastafari on persons in their art, like Osmond Watson. He has some really beautiful gems in relation to that. Karl Parbu Singh and Barrington Watson. And of course, Daly and Iron Zion and other Rastafari painters and sculptures. They belong to that category of persons who are responsible for weaving the verbal, the visual aestheticism of Rastafari and of people coming out of colonialism. So in one way or the other, their works focused on, or could be said to be part of the anti-colonial movement and the anti-colonial struggles for independence. And after that, for the reshaping of Jamaican identity, and for charting a path of decolonization that reflects the agency of the people, their ideas about freedom, their ideas about beauty, their ideas about governance, so that Ras Daniel Heartman represents all of this. And he comes from a category of persons that were not as large as those who were in the field of music, but nonetheless represent a very important segment or sector of that cultural revolution. And therefore, as you're doing, more attention needs to be paid to Ras Daniel Heartman, but also to that category of visual artists, from the position of philosophy, from the position of aesthetics, from the position of decolonization, from the position of the centering of Black sovereignty, which there are two things about his work. One, is the dignity in which he creates the presence of Rastafari, of blackness, of the black body. That is central to that tenderness in which he was able to do that. And I think that is one of the reasons why his work became so popular globally. You find his work throughout the Caribbean, even now. I mean, the issue of not being compensated because people just print his work on T-shirts. You go to Trinidad to a festival, and you see people selling T-shirts.
Your camera is off, Clinton.
Sorry, okay. Yes, I was saying that you see him, you go to a festival at different parts of the world, and you would see his work being sold on flags, on T-shirts, on posters, and so on. And as a result, that is not paid for, and it's still being done. I mean, we have some musicians who suffered that. But I think in the visual art form, Ras Daniel suffered more than anybody else in terms of being paid for his work. But his works were being acquired, certainly locally, by the emerging Jamaican middle class, especially those related to the intelligentsia or the professional class. I mean, for example, Richard Small, persons like Richard Small owned, purchased works done by Ras Daniel Heartman. Douglas Hall, for example, is another person. But on a larger scale, because they were reproduced poster-like, many ordinary persons also bought his work. And at one point, you could go into houses across Jamaica and see his work framed and put on the wall. I'm going to end for now here, just by saying, and you see the image on the screen just now, not this one, the one before that. I have a number, about 3 or so images like these. These are my own work. Ras Daniel works in charcoal mainly and pencil. He has a few paintings, and he has that side of Ras Daniel Heartman that is very mystic and which cannot be separated from the way in which that type expressive type of mysticism is also endowed in his portraits. But if you want to see that, and they are less known, but they are nonetheless quite powerful. Well, just to say that Ras Daniel Heartman influenced my work, I started to do pen and ink drawings in the 1970s. I was not into charcoal. I was not so much into pencil, but pen and ink drawings, they were clearly influenced by Ras Daniel Heartman. I'll stop here for now.
Give thanks, Professor. Much appreciation. Daniel Heartman as being responsible for, or coming out of that Rastafari cultural revolution. I was waiting on that word, because what you've really helped us to understand is that he represents a part of genius of various dimensions that we see exhibited by Rastafari that brought them not just to national but to international attention. Bob Marley as one such, etc. And I'm reminded that Daniel Heartman is the same age group as someone like Pele, you know. So it's you're talking about the Black Atlantic and a certain kind of ethos among those that generation born just around the Second World War. And you know, when I listen to elders like Plano, he tells me how very much disruptive that interwar period was for the parents as well as the children raised. So perhaps those are some of the issues we have also. Thanks again, Professor Hutton. We're told that Janoi Jaja is here with us, and I know that his time might be somewhat limited. We're really happy. We were urged by Ras Miguel Lorne to get in touch with you. He said something like this: needed to have your voice, my good brother. We are told that you knew Ras Daniel Heartman in a more familial way. So we want for you to share some of that proximity, some of that overstanding with us today. I know your time is limited. Congratulations on your personal celebrations as well. And thanks again. Janoi? Is he still with us? Janoi Jaja? All right. It seems as though he may have already left. Can we check on that, please? All right, so we will then move along to our next contribution. I'd like to ask our sister from another part of the world who is an expert in the art of this part of the world. She is a Caribbean art scholar of extraordinary insight and work. I want to welcome Dr. Verly Poupe to share her contribution with us this afternoon, and thank her once more.
Thank you, and I'm very humbled and honored by that introduction. Let me first start by sharing my screen so that I do not run into technical problems. Right. All right, so what I will speak about today is Ras Daniel Heartman's place in Jamaican art history and what needs to be done from my perspective as an art historian and curator to do greater justice to his important artistic and cultural legacy. It is also an invitation for further discussion and, for that matter, decisive action on the subject. Let me start with a few personal recollections, and I will give away my age here. I moved to Jamaica as a young art historian in September 1984, and soon thereafter started working at the National Gallery of Jamaica, initially in the education department, and as of 1987 as a curator. At that time, the work of Ras Daniel Heartman was strongly present in the Jamaican visual environment, although not all of that may have involved authorized reproduction. Copies of his best-known prints were sold at places such as Sangster's bookstores, and I recall seeing framed prints in several Jamaican homes I visited. His work was also featured in publications I came across at that time, such as Leonard Barrett's seminal book, The Rastafarians, The Dreadlocks of Jamaica, which was published in 1977, which reproduces his Not Far Away, which is probably one of his best-known images. I may in fact already have seen his work before I moved to Jamaica, as it appears on several reggae record covers, but I would not have been aware of him as an artist at that time. Ras Daniel Heartman's work helped to produce the visual imaginary of Rastafari with great clarity of purpose, a unique imagination, and in a distinctive, highly recognized style. It is an iconic part of Jamaican art and visual culture of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, which had and still has significant public appeal in Jamaica beyond. But it was also virtually absent. And just putting this in here to show how widely his work has reached. But it was interesting that Jalani mentioned Pele a while ago. But it was also virtually absent from the mainstream art world I came to inhabit at the National Gallery of Jamaica. Although he lived in Jamaica at the time I moved here, and although I had met and gotten to know many other Jamaican artists, most of them through the National Gallery, I never met Ras Daniel Heartman and did not know him personally. It is not that the National Gallery did not exhibit and collect Rastafari artists, or seems to have had any difficulty with the spiritual beliefs and worldviews they expressed. Self-taught artists such as Everall Brown and Albert Artwell, and mainstream artists who were not necessarily Rastafari themselves, but who sympathized and used its imagery, such as Osmond Watson and Christopher Gonzalez, are well represented in the National Gallery's collections, exhibitions, and publications. Most of these artists use imagery that is related to that of Ras Daniel Heartman, so the question arises why his work in particular has not been granted similar recognition, at least recognition by the mainstream art world, that is. I had some recollections of seeing a work by Ras Daniel Heartman in an exhibition at the National Gallery in the mid-1980s, a painting with images of pyramids and a black profile head. And in preparation for this seminar, I scoured my collection of catalogues from that period and found absolutely nothing. It appears that he never exhibited at the National Gallery during his lifetime, and I may have seen his work at the festival exhibition or another exhibition instead. I also contacted the National Gallery to verify what works by him, if any, were in the collection. And apologies for this terrible image, but it is what I received. I was told that the only work in the collection is the early painting Jamaican Farmer from 1968, which is hardly representative of his work, although it does confirm that he indeed also painted. More than likely, this work was exhibited at and acquired by the Institute of Jamaica before the National Gallery was established. I also looked at the catalogue of Rastafari Kunst, a 1992 exhibition of Rastafarian art, which was curated by the German anthropologist Wolfgang Bender for the Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin, Germany, as I would have expected his work to be included in such a specialized exhibition of Rastafari art, the only of its kind to date. The catalogue was later published in English as Rastafarian Art by Ian Radl. The exhibition focused on popular self-taught artists and provided a very comprehensive overview, but Ras Daniel Heartman was not included. Ras Daniel would already have moved to Tanzania when the field work for this exhibition was done and had died by the time the exhibition was held, which may also have contributed to the omission, but there may be other reasons too, and I will return to those. So the question arises why it is that Ras Daniel Heartman, whose work is so iconic of the period in which it was created and which has circulated so widely, has remained in the margins of Jamaica's mainstream art historical narratives to the point of near total omission. I recall conversations about his work in the National Gallery's education department, as the National Gallery was repeatedly called out for this omission. There were two arguments that consistently came up. One was that his work, in the form it was best known at that time, did not consist of quote-unquote original works of art, as his prints were uneditioned, mechanical lithographic reproductions of his drawings. The other was that he frequently drew from existing photographs and not necessarily his own, which is an issue which is still of some contention in the conservative mainstream art world today. All of this, of course, has a lot to do with how art has been conventionally defined in Jamaican art history, in terms of the necessary uniqueness of the artwork as something which is produced by the human hand. For similar reasons, it took a long time before the National Gallery fully accepted photography as an art form. The reluctance to include Ras Daniel Heartman in Jamaica's rather narrowly defined official artistic canons also stems from a lack of understanding of the image economy that has helped to shape modern Jamaican and African diaspora culture. Marcus Garvey understood it well, and the photographs he and the UNIA circulated extensively have helped to create a well-established iconography in which the image of Garvey and the ideas he represented are coded in ways that are widely understood. In fact, they were pioneering in that regard. This iconography is regularly used in Jamaican art, especially in street art, and without contention about its photographic and mechanically reproduced origins. The iconography of Rastafari developed by means of similar processes, such as the coronation photographs of His Imperial Majesty, which circulated globally and reached Jamaica through publications such as National Geographic. When Ras Daniel Heartman's work is seen in the context of that image economy, in which images are reproduced not only for entrepreneurial reasons, but also as a way of circulating and promoting their spiritual and ideological messages widely, the mainstream art world's old reservations about his work are irrelevant. Today, technological developments and the shifting concepts and critical interrogations of contemporary art have furthermore embraced mechanical reproduction and circulation, rendering those old reservations even more obsolete. But there are other, perhaps even more problematic reasons why Ras Daniel Heartman's work has been marginalized in the official histories of Jamaican art. When we look at how Rastafari art has been framed, it is obvious that there are some narrow and limiting preconceptions at work in terms of what legitimate, popular, self-taught art should look like, enshrined in how the National Gallery defined its intuitive category. This is also evident in the earlier mentioned German book and exhibition Rastafari Kunst, which provides an anthropological perspective on the subject. Likewise, there are certain unacknowledged expectations about who the artists who use a more academic, realist language are expected to be socially in terms of their art education and in terms of how they position themselves in the art world. Ras Daniel Heartman's work does not fit any of these established and actively prescribed categories of Jamaican art, which are deeply linked and which are deeply linked to unacknowledged preconceptions about race, class, and culture. His work, by implication, challenges and exposes those preconceptions and categories, which is an important point that needs to be made more actively in the historical and critical scholarship about his work. So what needs to be done to ensure that Ras Daniel Heartman's work takes its rightful place in Jamaica's art histories? Valuable and indeed groundbreaking work has already been done by some of the scholars present at this seminar. Tribute Facebook and Instagram pages have been in operation for a few years now, and I understand that they are managed by the foundation. There was also a dedicated website for a while, but from what I have seen, this is not active at this time. Much more, however, needs to be done. One major step is that Ras Daniel Heartman's work needs to be even more thoroughly researched and documented, as there is more of his work than the dozen or so images by which it is best known. We, for instance, don't know enough about his more intricate mystical drawings from the 1980s, which need to be carefully documented and studied. They are truly extraordinary in terms of their remarkable iconographical and formal qualities and the tantalizing ideas about life, death, spirituality, Africanness, and transcendence they seem to represent. Some years ago, I saw an extraordinary set of such large drawings in the office of a well-known Jamaican art collector, which to my knowledge have not been exhibited or reproduced. I had hoped to photograph and study them for this presentation, but this proved not to be possible in the time available. There's probably much more work out there, and it needs to be found and documented. His work in painting also needs to be looked at, and there ought to be a project to create a full annotated catalogue, a catalogue raisonné of his known work, updated with new finds as they become known. There also ought to be a better understanding of where and how his work has been exhibited and reproduced, and where his original drawings are located for those that still survive today. Ideally, there should be a comprehensive exhibition accompanied by a well-researched, edited, and produced book. It may be worth lobbying with the National Gallery of Jamaica for a retrospective, which could become a more widely circulated touring exhibition. There should also be steps to ensure that at least some of his major works are included in the collection of the National Gallery and available for permanent viewing there. And the website, of course, also needs to be revived and updated, since having a wholesome online presence is essential for artists' reputation these days. On that note, I am well aware of the copyright abuses of Ras Daniel Heartman's work that have occurred in the past and which, according to Clinton, still happen today. And these have caused an understandable reluctance to use or authorize any reproductions of his work in publications. But that caution may also have contributed inadvertently to the relative invisibility of his work, at least in the context of the art world at the present time. The estate or its designated representatives need a clearly articulated position on copyright, with clarity on who to contact for permission and what sort of uses would be permitted and under what terms. Such provisions ought not to be unnecessarily prohibitive, certainly for scholarly and educational use, as an artist's work needs to be seen, circulated, and reproduced for its worth to be recognized in the public's eye. Ras Daniel Heartman's legacy should, of course, not be represented or exploited commercially without authorization, but his life should not be hidden under a bushel either. So I hope that this webinar will help to pave the way for the long overdue reclamation of Ras Daniel Heartman's place in Jamaica's art histories and beyond, and lead to some decisive action on that point. I can think of no better tribute to his legacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Verlies, Jelani, nearby.
Yeah, I am present. Give thanks, Verdi. Well charged. And I know that you're fully on board with that charge yourself. Very sort of clear conversation. I know that collection you're talking about, and it is remarkable that Daniel Heartman is missed. And I think that conversation was nicely framed. Thank you so much for that. It's really the reclamation of the legacy of this Rastafari master artist. And you're suggesting various things, retrospective collaborations, things that center him as a part of the construction of this Black art, Rastafari art landscape. Cosmologically, we give thanks again. I would like to now invite, I think Janoy Jaja is now available. Are we correct in that?
No, we're still working on getting him in.
All right, so I'm going to invite my sister from the UK who has time differences. I should be sensitive to such. And ask her to make her contribution. Amma Clark has done research, which she will share with us about our celebrated artist today, Ras Daniel Heartman. Amma, a question that maybe I can somehow pose. The name that he signs under, is there a story that you're aware of surrounding that? You're still muted. Give thanks.
He signs a lot under the name Church Triumphant. So Church Triumphant was a house of Rastafari that I think was in West Kingston and then went to East Kingston after some time in the 60s and 70s. And he was quite an active and integral member of that body. So he signs his name Church Triumphant. It's a representation of what he stood for.
Give thanks. Yes, please, give thanks. Go ahead.
I'm just going to ask Colleen if you can enable me to share my screen. That would be great.
Okay, sure.
Rastafari, peace and love to everyone gathered. It's a real honor for me to be here. It's a little time since I've thought about Ras Daniel, so I kind of am excited, overjoyed that this webinar is taking place. A nice opportunity for us to reflect on someone who's given us so much. So I thought I would, sorry. I thought that I would not do some more research as such, although research is good. But I thought in honor of his birthday, that it might be nice just to kind of do a celebration of Ras Daniel as we see him today. So obviously he has passed on, but the work has endured. And that is an amazing legacy as far as I'm concerned. So my presentation is very much from that perspective. I think, well, not I think, I know that Rastafari gave us the concept of the Black God, of God in man. And Ras Daniel was able to make that image real for us, something that we could touch, that we could have in our homes, that we could wear on our bodies. An image of Black divinity in a very everyday kind of everyday style and fashion. And yes, his images are to be found worldwide. So this is one of the most popular image, Prince Emmanuel. And Sister Pam was kind enough to share this with me to use today. And so I had a conversation with Atto Heartman about today's webinar and how to really show Ras Daniel's impact. And so he shared the following photographs with me, which I just bring to you. So this concept of Black divinity is as relevant today as it was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when Heartman was really at his most prolific. It's as relevant to young people today as it is to the older generation, as something that helps us to hark back to a time that we recognize, a Black ascendancy. Ras Daniel said that there were three things that were most important to his liberty. That was church triumphant, his love for Selassie, and repatriation. And I think those concepts, church triumphant or Rastafari in general, Selassie as God in man, and repatriation for the whole of the diaspora, are things that we today are still working out. And when I see this picture, I think of what Ras Daniel has left for the generations, the generations of his own two sons, but the generations that have followed that still find something relevant, inspiring, uplifting, and triumphant in his imagery. In terms of legacy, there is an estate which has been established in the last 12 or so years. And it's run principally by Ras Daniel's younger son, Atto. It's his older son, Manai, that's pictured in Father and Son, the portrait there in the photo. And Atto has done, I think, an amazing job in trying to establish and enforce copyright around his father's work. I mean, it's a kind of tribute to Ras Daniel's popularity, the popularity of the works that he created, in that it is so prolific worldwide in any form you can imagine. There's an imprint of his there. But none of that kind of reproduction, duplication has done anything to further the estate or to show or give recognition to Ras Daniel as the creator himself. And so getting the estate established has been an important and painstaking part of the process. Being able to say to people, you need to take that down, that is not authorized, I think that's a strong step as well. Getting to the point where they're actually able to have a complete collection of Ras Daniel's works, which can be loaned or licensed according to, the rules of the estate. Then that's the next step. And as you can imagine, this is painstaking work for someone who's not necessarily trained in the law and contracts and intellectual property and all of that, but someone who recognizes what his legacy is and that he and his brother need to protect it. So I was quite happy to kind of collaborate with Atto for today's webinar, because I kind of feel like, to show an image of Ras Daniel now, I need to kind of check, is it okay? Is it okay to show this? Who has ownership of this? Who profits from this if it's shown? And yes, Ras Daniel has passed from us for some time now, but the enduring legacy is this body of work and the relevance that so many people from so many different parts of the world, so many different walks of life feel that it has for them. So, I mean, I think, future conversations about how to strengthen the estate, how to ensure the longevity of Ras Daniel's work, to ensure that it's protected, I think those conversations are important too. So I think I will end there.
Okay, thank you very much, Sister Amma. You've outlined to us that there is a legitimate entity that is responsible or is positioning itself in the space to manage the copyright issues surrounding Ras Daniel's work. In fact, your conversation really is following on from the previous conversation about how to seriously and legitimately celebrate Daniel Heartman to the level that he needs to be, and some of the issues that need to be navigated. In fact, going back to Clinton's conversation about a certain kind of a generation of Rastafari cultural revolutionaries, the model demonstrated by the Marley family is one that we have to be reminded of. Someone's mic is unmuted. Can we just do that? Mute that, please.
It's Janoy's, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that family has, from that same generation of critical artists, they've presented to the world a particular version of managing the
Okay,
intellectual
so I see
production.
you worked out how to.
Sister Colleen, we're hearing that generation, I think, can be informed. I think Peter Tosh's estate has been similarly moving, but there are some best practices I think that we now have that we can examine. I want to invite Janoy Jaja to join us now. I'm told that he may have had some challenges getting online, but I think those have been overcome. My brother, are you with us? Yes, I see your mic open.
Greetings, yes.
Give thanks. We
We'll
know
start
that
a bit.
you have other things happening. You can see brother Jerry Small standing in the background. He's joined us on
Greetings,
spot.
Jerry. Blessings.
Yeah, man. But we were advised by Ras Miguel, Lauren, that this conversation couldn't happen unless we spoke to someone like you, who knew Daniel Heartman differently, as someone who was living in the same space. Tell us how that kind of, how did you come to be in that relationship with Ras Daniel Heartman? And what do you wish to share of that relationship?
Well, the relationship with Heartman and myself it started off with Bona. I don't know if you know Bona who has left us recently. You know, Bona and I were when Bona came back. I had a studio at 10 Oxford Road. It was known as Diplomat at the time. And that was like a meeting place for a lot of races and stuff like. I mean, Peter Touch checking and coming on there. Kidasai, Bona, not hearing?
Yeah, man. Hearing.
I'm
We're
here.
hearing it very well,
Yeah, Kidasai, Bona, the races of that time. Jalloyd in the works, you know. So my place was like a center. You know, I mean, young races coming up at that time. Very few people at my age at that time went into the Rastafarian order. And also, as a seeker myself at that time, just pretty young in the movement at that time, you know. And Heartman seemed to, we just sat there at link. It was more like a spiritual link than anything else. You know what I mean? We were so linked together that he would come there, he would spend some time and we'd talk about things, but he was always quietly within his own self, doing his own thing. But I found out after a while that over the period of time that he was with me, he was observing me at a very, very serious level because my attitude to life was pretty much his own. His was very positive. We had a mission that we had to accomplish, and he knew what his mission was about and really went into it, you know. For me, I started on a mission myself, which I have completed that mission, which I give thanks to, you know what I mean? But he was that person beside me. I keep seeing him, and that was that mystical energy, you know, that was always there. We didn't do a lot of talking, but whenever we talk, it was so meaningful, you know, in whatever he's saying, very, very, very deep, you know. So I remember during that period, he was there. I mean, everything, I'm a very pretty hospitable person in terms of just seeing that if one is around me, I try to be kind and whatever. And as a Ras, I just believe in the word one love, you know, not just a belief, I live it, you know. So Heartman was that person to me. And he would actually just there doing his work from time to time. And I remember he put together, he did an image for me. Pretty before, like when he was planning to leave and all that was going, he did a artwork. It was like the opening of a heart. You know, when you look, you see all these movements, everything. And my face was inside of this art, you know. And he gave that to me, and he left and went about his way and started all the arrangement. But when he was leaving, the most significant thing to me was that he came to me and he said to me, he said, Janai, you know, all of them are waiting me for dead, you know. And so, you know, I don't really sign nobody work. But because of the energy that I've had with you, this is my last mission. I'm leaving here, going straight to the airport now. I'm going to sign this piece of work for you. And he did it. He signed that piece of work. And the amazing thing about it is that I don't have that piece of work now, you know. And where I think that work should be or where it is, I just can't get to it. And it makes me feel away. But at the same time, I'll never forget that energy with him, you know. And just when he left, he went on his mission. I also went on a mission after that because I gave up a lot. I gave up everything materially and went away. Went back. When I say went away, went back into the hills, completely into the hills of Negril, and spent a lot of time there. You know what I mean? For the part, spent about 25 years there, and then I'm back in Kingston. I'm not in Kingston, but I'm back closer to the center of the island now. I'm in Bucharest, you know, in the hills of Shaw Park Garden, yeah. So Heartman was that person to me, you know, and I've always remembered it because that spirit of a warrior, you know, that's what Heartman represented. He was a man who believed in himself, believed in his work, and I appreciate people like that. I appreciate the ones that can actually just be themselves.
So he actually lived with you just before departing for Tanzania then?
Yes.
And you were aware that that was going to happen? And
Yes.
And that you were not necessarily going to see him. Did he have a decisive decision about, yeah?
When he actually left, I didn't, in fact, let me put it this way. I've always told myself I need to go to Africa. In fact, part of my journey, I know that once he leaves there, he's not going to be coming back. He's going to be there. So one of the things of at that time is that I think I wanted to go to Africa. But then again, after that situation, I realized that my mission was not really to go to Africa at this point in this lifetime, but it's to create the family that understand what Africa is all about and create another part of Africa right here that will make that link. So I had to start it from my family. And I was in the midst of all of that family settings when I met Heartman, because I met Heartman, in fact, over the years, I've got 9 kids, 7 of them are alive, five girls, 4 boys. I have my 5 girls alive. In fact, I was talking to Colleen today, I was saying that I don't know how I'm going, if this meeting is going to go, because I have these ladies who keep calling me, which is my babies. I call them still my babies, but we are so close. And that was the thing. It was like a family energy when Heartman was around me. He was just, to me, he was just a part of the situation, a part of the whole energy.
That name Heartman, you know how he came by that option?
No.
You don't know that, okay. But it seems like the heart has been central in his energy generally.
Yes, because even his work, if you know the work that he does, the work that he did is like an open heart, like you cut a heart in half, so all these, the valves and all these things going through, and there's my face in the middle of it. It was one of those pieces of work that it really, in fact, I'm looking at it just now, but it's one of those things, it's like a test of the universe saying, if you lose these things as a material things, how much would it mean to you? How much would you, what will you do? But you have to overcome, but his memory is much more, to me, much more valuable than even that piece of work, you know? I think I'd send out an image, the last image I could find on, because one of the things when I went to Negril, actually, what I did was I gave up everything. I had to prove myself spiritually because I'm one of those people who don't believe in anything. My order is of knowledge. If I cannot acknowledge something, physically work it, to me it don't exist. That's why Rastafari exists. But within that, going into Rastafari was a means of taking me on a spiritual pathway, which I was able to identify through Rastafari. So Heartman to me at that time was part of that spiritual energy. Part of that, the part is one of the angels that I need to meet along my journey. We all have our journey. Heartman was part of my journey because he showed me that in fact, to me, Heartman believed in himself. And that was the most important thing to me because I see so many people and they just don't believe in it, they believe in something else. They call names, different names and stuff. I'm not into names. I live my life. I live my, I live what is my beliefs, my personal beliefs. So my God is within me. My God, I see my God through. If I'm going to use a physical person to see my God through, I see him through my King. And my King is here, Selassie, right? And so those are the energies that I work with. When I went to Negrino, it's so strange that Heartman would give me a strength to seek even further how much energy and power I can give to my spirit. And to use that energy to achieve the things that I wanted. Heartman, when Heartman was there, say he's going to Africa. And whatever he's going to be there. And whatever is going to happen, it's going to happen there. He realized his dream. My dream here was to create a family, to sow a seed, to plant a seed in the West that bringeth forth fruit, that glorify these. You know? So, and I've done that. And this is why I'm here today talking to you, because these ladies I'm telling you about, I have 5 ladies in my life, my girl. And I get 8 grandchildren. And it's so strange again. I get pretty much the same order of grandchildren as my children first, as my firstborn. And strangely enough, these people, they're just so close. I have one of the best, in fact, if I might say so, right? Probably the energy that I got from Heartman and people that was around me. I have one of the greatest family in the world. I have a family that with so much love that, believe you me, man. Sometimes I ask myself, why are you so fortunate? But I think I'm fortunate because of the work that has been done, the people that I've met, the kind of energy that come around me. Right now, I'm living in an environment that, if you ask me where I'm in, I say I'm in heaven. And when I say that, I mean it, really, really mean it. Heaven in that I'm here, I see a nice blue sea, the universe, the bees. I get up listening to the birds. I can talk to I see the lizards run around me and them talk. We chat around the dog. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm one with nature. I'm one with the universe, you know? And all because of people like Heartman. These are the people that inspired me at that time, because when I met Heartman, I was just getting into what Rastafari is all about. I was always aware of it because listen, I'm a 76-year-old man at this time. I'm 70. So I've been always aware of Rasta, but in terms of, it's only then, in that early period of my life, right, that I wanted to know more. And Heartman was part of that situation in getting there. Heartman, man like Heartman, Ras Michael, Sons of Nigger, all of them people, you know, I was there, you know. So I give thanks. Thanks today to honor that man, because I've always wanted to say something really good about him. Yes, I honor that soul, you know. That soul is a blessed soul. That soul has brought along lots of folk. Just by his attitude to work, because when I watch him work, he's so intense. He was in another world. It's a world that I understand. So it's all blessings and no one love, my Lord. I will always remember that man.
Give thanks, Jaja.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
My brethren, it's really a pleasure listening to you, you know?
Yes, yes.
Did you know Ras Shadrach?
Yes, not very well though.
Okay. I asked because he was sort of a mentor to Ras Daniel. You know, and in fact, I would go as far as to say that what Ras Shadrach, what Mortimer Planner was to Bob Marley, it was Ras Shadrach to Ras Daniel Heartman.
Yes, I will add a lot of connections also with Marty.
Okay.
Marty, I was like to Marty, well, let me take him on a wing and really sit with that and get some, he was, I don't know, there was a certain energy amongst the elders when I met them at that time, I don't know, the energy of good spirit. You can look on a person and feel certain energy. You can see certain things coming out of them, you know what I mean? And that is what attracted me to people like them. You might would come and just say, sit down beside me, man. And just say what you want to say because they feel like, what you want to hear? Tell me, And I was happy to meet, believe you me, I've had a great life. I had a very, very great life, I must say, because just to meet these people, because they were the ones that guided me, and they were the ones who brought along that revolutionary spirit and brought it out and allowed me to express it. Because man like Peter, I remember when Peter had this argument with the drummer, oh man, when him fight off with my brother, oh come on, names getting too old for names. But Peter, when Peter get into his energy, even I remember Peter had an argument with Miguel one at a time. And Peter, the first place Peter came was my when Miguel did. It was just a little thing, no matter what was happening. And Peter would meet me. In fact, I remember at the time just growing some herb. I was living way up in Blue Mountain. Peter would want growing some herb in clandestine stuff, nobody can know. And Peter was able to find that I had the herb. Peter left the studio, find my place. I have the last house on Blue Mountain close, and Peter could find that house just to get that herb. So I had these people around me, you know what I mean? In fact, I'll tell you something, I also watched that time because, the US embassy was on either side of me at once. They were right across the road from me on the right, and they were right on the left of me. And because of these people who were coming there, these people, a lot of them, the US embassy had them on the surveillance, you know what I'm saying? So I remember the first time I walked into America, is that I walked straight into the consular and gave him my passport and told him I want a visa. But before I gave him the passport, I went for him and said, Mr. Georgia, what is it I can do for you? I said, well, I'm a steward there and I need a visa to go to America. So he said, well, Mr. Georgia, you have to go get your passport and bring it over here. At this time, I had a passport in my bag. I just go in my bag, take out the passport, the application form, and give it to him. Him look at me and laugh. Him could say to me, come back here. Come back with your passport here. So these things are the things that has happened to me. I call them magical things, spiritual magical things. And these were the people I had around me. And I remember even myself, I was a person who asked the embassy man to give Ras Michael a visa. And he did. And he came back, I can't face it, with white man by the name of what? Wales or something like that. Maybe one day said to me, Mr. Jaja, is Ras Michael coming back? I said, sure, man, don't worry about it. Right? But after a while, he called me the next time and said, Mr. Jaja, he said, January, because they come. He said, January, I'm being moved. I'm moving. I'm going to be moved, going somewhere way far from him. He said, well, he said, they're moving me. He was getting a little bit too close to us. In fact, we were getting a little bit too close to them. So this was it. So I've had a good life. I've had a good life, and believe you me, Rasta Heartman did really enhance my life.
We give thanks. You use the word that hasn't been used since evening when you described him as one of those angels.
Yes.
And certainly I think we would all agree that he did manage to have that angelic transmission there. Thank you for pausing to speak to us this afternoon. And we're going to move on now to our final speaker, who is, thank you again, who is Monique Bedassi. whose link to this space comes as a historian who we introduced before, but has unearthed some stuff related to Ras Daniel Heartman's latter years in Tanzania. All right, so
Ras
please.
Jalani, before you Money jumps in, can we just say greetings to those who are on YouTube? We are reading your comments. We just want to have all the speakers present, and then we'll share some of what you're sharing in that space.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so it's over to you, my sister, and thank you again for accepting our invitation.
Thank you so much, Jelani, and thanks to Colleen for allowing me to participate in this tribute to Ras Daniel Heartman. So of course, I was familiar with Heartman's work as a child, even before I knew his name. But I came to Heartman as an important historical figure through the research from my own work on repatriation to Tanzania. As most of you may already know, Heartman, along with his son, Ato Kidani, left Jamaica for Tanzania in October 1988. Unfortunately, Heartman transitioned in Arusha only a year and 7 months after he made the trod to Zion. And I want to acknowledge his son, Ato, a brilliant artist in his own right, a warrior in the struggle to ensure that his father gets the recognition he deserves in Jamaican, Caribbean, and world history, and a man to whom I'm indebted, without whom I would never have gained access to important details about Heartman's incredible life and about the history of repatriation to Tanzania more broadly. So my brief comments today, I want to say a little bit about Ras Daniel Heartman and the historical record. Specifically, the work scholars are yet to do on Heartman's life and art, which has been a recurrent theme this evening. And I'm making a few suggestions about what I perceive to be uncharted territory. And then within that context, I'll offer a meditation on the analytical pathways he offers us in terms of the history of repatriation in particular. I want to begin with a confession. I do history, and so I'm not in the business of what could or should have been. But I admit that I've often wondered what else Heartman would have contributed to the world had he not transitioned in his 40s. And in particular, I've wondered how his life in Tanzania would have unfolded and how the art that he probably would have created there would have reflected the experience of repatriation and of life on the continent more broadly. And that has led me to think about what a biography of Heartman might look like, restricted by the impossibility of the kind of self-reflection to which scholars may have gained access had he lived to be old. I think about what we've lost, but I also think about what we've gained and the fact that we've not sufficiently mined the sources of information we do have across different types of archives, from his iconic artistic pieces, which have been circulating within and beyond Jamaica for decades, to the minds of those with whom he interacted, and also what I call the embodied living archive that is his son, Ato Kidani. But in addition to that, we also have his lesser known artwork, which speaks loudly to how cerebral he was and to the possibilities he offers as we build on the intellectual history of Rastafari, and as we think about what Rasta art contributes to our understanding of such a diverse movement. The early 1980s saw a more introspective Heartman. A bibliophile, he developed a profound interest in and read voraciously about a wide range of topics, including anatomy, astronomy, astrology, metaphysics, ancient Egyptian civilization, and hieroglyphics. He wanted to learn new languages and to venture into new mental worlds. The art he produced during this decade reflects these various influences, and we're yet to grapple with the symbology he employed in these pieces and what it tells us about his evolution as an artist, as a man, and as a Rasta man in particular. In the best ways, Heartman was a man in motion, not just in terms of his physical movement from Jamaica to Africa, but in terms of his refusal to remain static as an artist. Heartman fell ill shortly after he arrived in Tanzania, and as a result, we do not have artwork from his time there. But he was offered the opportunity to teach art at the University of Dar es Salaam shortly before he transitioned. We will never know how that would have shaped his life and the lives of the students he would have taught. But that he received this offer is a meaningful addition to the historical record that adds to our understanding of his international impact and of what he may have contributed to Tanzanian nation building had he lived. In the time I've left, I want to go to my second point, which is to tell you a little bit about what I think Heartman's contribution to the repatriation offers us, or some of what it offers us. Some brief background. In 1985, based on the work of Ras Karudi and Ras Joshua Mkululi, Julius Nyerere, then president of Tanzania, granted Rastafari people what Karudi called the right of entry into Tanzania. Karudi left Tanzania for Jamaica in August 1986, and his goal was to encourage other Rastafari to leave Jamaica permanently. His plan was to recruit Rastafari elders who would form the core of the Rastafari community he hoped to build in Tanzania. Elders who, while translating their own dream of repatriation into a lived reality, would also provide spiritual instruction and guidance for younger Rastafari in Tanzania. Karudi's vision was to establish a provisional elder council, that's what he called it. And as he walked the streets of Kingston in search of those who were worthy of such a responsibility, he was overjoyed when Heartman, only 44 years old then, had already been elevated to the category of elder, was eager to accept his invitation. Heartman had come of age among Rastafari in legendary spaces in West Kingston, especially within Church Triumphant. Based solely on Heartman's stature as respected elder and artist, Karudi reported a month later, in his own words, that the work of establishing the Provisional Elder Council is going really well. After Heartman agreed to make the move to Tanzania, Karudi assured him that he would raise the necessary funds to pay for the trip. As Heartman waited for this, he faced another major obstacle. He initially refused to apply for a Jamaican passport. Of course, this makes sense as a declaration of Rastafari identity, his identity as African and not Jamaican, his rejection of the nation state as the arbiter of a diasporic identity he did not claim. Heartman eventually decides to get the passport after pleading with Jamaican officials to allow him to leave without one. But I'm also thinking about his unwillingness to get a Jamaican passport and the effort he made to stick to this in terms of the way that it declares the documentation of Babylon and of the Westphalian system illegitimate, the way that it foregrounds an alternative world order and insists on the right of Africans globally to move across boundaries based on a very different idea of place, space, and identity, and of sovereignty. I want to note that different from the rejection of the colonial state during the first few decades of Rastafari, during the 1980s when this is happening, this includes a rejection of fairly new Black nation states as well, which situates Heartman within a radical tradition that continued to assert ideas of liberation that did not center the nation state within this decade, which is often assumed to be a conservative decade that had successfully suppressed the radical politics we associate with the 1960s and the 1970s. Heartman also challenges state policy again when he arrived in Tanzania, as he had not met the requirements for vaccines and was not allowed to enter Tanzania until the Prime Minister's office intervened to make an exception. For me, there's something interesting and valuable about the way that this deeply entrenched belief in a core idea of Rastafari, made him believe in the possibility of subverting the state apparatus without a second thought. I want to end by sharing my thoughts on why Heartman's iconic piece, Not Far Away, appears on the cover of my own book on this topic. I chose it not just because it's obviously about repatriation. Art historians, including those in this room, have given us, interpretations of Not Far Away that are far more beautiful and apropos than anything I could ever offer. But Not Far Away really is a very powerful and powerfully emotive piece, an artistic rendering of a crucial aspect of the diasporic imagination that animates Rastafari. And in terms of Heartman's personal journey as both artist and human, it represents his longing for Africa. I'd also argue that it calls us to think about Heartman in terms of his prophetic gifts, as the dream he captured in this piece did indeed become a reality. But I chose it for another reason, because for me, it resonates with an aspect of the project of repatriation to Tanzania that was central to the thinking of its leaders, and that is return as a spiritual journey. Karudi, in writing and talking about the repatriation, which he certainly shared with Heartman when he recruited him in Jamaica, constantly gave in his words, and I'm quoting Ras here, I will live in Isis unto I and I, mighty Redeemer, who in this dispensation of time has proved faithful and true to the biblical promise of delivering the chosen few of that remnant, the returning home, biblical Black Ethiopian exiled captives. Let it be known that the Liquor Rasta man and all other proven suffering servants of Jah, who are regarded by Babylon's high society as the dregs of them society, in the bottomless pit are still daily living and fulfilling the Holy Bible prophecies, and not only reading about Bible prophecies, but living them, hence suffering persecution for the sake of righteousness. This, however, is as it was supposed to be, being a humble little part of the forces of God from iration till now, and ever so shall be. The repatriation struggle in Tanzania has proven itself to be most relevant spiritually, biblically, whether ones and ones care to acknowledge and accept this, end of quote. And when I look at Not Far Away, I'm reminded of the tremendous significance of Heartman's art for the history of Rastafari. In Not Far Away, I see an artistic rendering of what Kurudi establishes here, a journey that is both personal and about all Rastafari people, both overtly political and hauntingly intimate. A man living the very human fulfillment of prophecy, but also transcending the human experience, and also dwelling in the realm of the divine. That aspect of the piece that really, really is very haunting. In joining this particular group of Rastafari on the mission to repatriate, Heartman was, in Kurudi's words, quote, joining this giant-inspired, ongoing and live exodus, the movement of Jah people, the opening of the iron gate for the few to repatriate, end of quote. And it is this talent, this ability to showcase all these layers and so much more in Not Far Away that is the genius of Ras Daniel Heartman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my sister. It's very interesting that the last two contributions give us a sense that Daniel Heartman was decisive in his Not Far Away is achievable and also inspirational. And you know, there are various comments and criticisms about Rastafari and ultimate repatriation. He provides a certain example that he was committed to that vision. And I think that is really the whole point of it. Thanks so much again, my sister. You've shared with us a glimpse of him on the continent. And that as well is a major aspect of that unearthing that you charge us. I'm glad you decided to digress from history a little and wonder about that which is not history. You know? All right, so thanks much for that. There's one more contribution which we as a board want to share with you, and this comes from our brother Jake Homiak. Are you here with us, Jake? Who has factoids that we wish to share about a journey of a particular object of Ras Daniel Heartman. Yes, Ras Kaimo, we're over to you now for that.
I am here. Give thanks, my brother. Yeah, give thanks. First, let me, as others have, let me extend my thanks to all the speakers. This has really been a wonderful session. We've learned a lot. There's a lot of things now to meditate on with regard to Ras Daniel Heartman and his works. But I wanted to just briefly talk about the object that we used in the Smithsonian exhibition Discovering Rastafari, which was up from 2007 to 2011. And this was a 4x4 foot placard painted in oil by Ras Daniel Heartman sometime in the early 1960s, commissioned by Ras Shadrach, who, as our brethren, Brother Clinton has pointed out, was a kind of mentor to Daniel Heartman. I had the opportunity to meet, I never got the opportunity to meet Daniel Heartman, let me say that. In my work in the early 80s, I missed him on various occasions, close misses, but we never met. But I did want to meet Shadrach because I knew him by reputation, working in the 1980s, and I knew of his connection to Daniel Heartman. Now, it's always a dangerous thing for me to try to share my PowerPoint because I usually have a trial and blunder method, but is it possible to share a PowerPoint here, Jelani?
Tech IT people, can Jake be allowed? I think his co-host.
The
Yes.
IT people is Colleen, yes. You can, brother Jake.
Thanks.
So I just do share screen, right?
You can share screen.
Okay,
Give thanks, Sister
all right.
Colleen.
Give thanks, yes, slideshow. Slideshow from beginning. Okay, so in 1991, I, along with Russ Wittedred and a photographer, Suzanne Moss, visited Russ Shadrach when he was in Goldsmith Villa. And Shadrach had us wait for about an hour outside in this structure, which contained the placard, Church Triumphant of Jah Rastafari. When Shadrach finally came out and greeted us, and we got to reason with him, I asked him about this placard because I was struck, I was just taken by it. We are familiar with seeing many photographs and artistic renditions of His Imperial Majesty in coronation raiment, but we're familiar in seeing those photographs and representations as he was as a 37, 38-year-old young monarch in 1930 at his crowning. Here we have this placard, which according to Ras Shadrach, he commissioned from Daniel Heartman. And Heartman has rendered His Majesty as an aging monarch, as in fact he was at the time of the visit. But there's an interesting social history to this piece of art. It wasn't done immediately before the coming of the emperor. It was actually done in the early 1960s, probably 62 or 63. And it was initially done without the little piece on top, the semicircle which says peace and love, the Church Triumphant of Jah Rastafari, and probably without the welcome our Redeemer part of it. That was put on later, according to Ras Shadrach. And that was, this placard was taken around for various street meetings that Shadrach and members of the Church Triumphant, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel Heartman, Russ Dizzy, and a few others participated in. And I know it made its way, among other places, to Coronation Market, to Dog Park on Regent Street, and to Liberty Hall on King Street. And then at the time of the coming of His Majesty, it was given this detail on the top and was taken to the airport on the whatever vehicle that the Church Triumphant obtained to carry the brethren and sister into the airport. And it was among those many placards that were seen in photographs of His Majesty arrival at the airport. The amazing thing is, this would be an interesting archaeological investigation to find what of those placards exist today, because I suspect this is one of the only ones. So this photograph was taken by Suzanne Moss and certainly remembered by me vividly based on the reasoning with Ras Shadrach. I went back a couple of other times and re-engaged with him. He told me things like that confirm exactly what Brother Clinton Hutton has said, that Daniel Heartman was to Shadrach as Bob Marley was to Mortimer Plano. Shadrach referred to Heartman as the walking camera and as someone who had a capacity to depict Rastafari in a way that would advance the goals of the movement. So his artwork, there obviously was being recognized at that time as being part of that cultural and philosophical uprising that was coming up with reggae and the music of the time, as Clinton has told us. One of this object. Now let me just back up a little bit, because the evening of His Majesty's arrival in Jamaica was the moment at King's House when 13 or more Rastafari brethren are medaled, given gold medals by His Majesty. Here we see Shadrach kneeling before the king, accepting his medal. Behind him, waiting his turn, is Ras Daniel Heartman, holding a portrait of His Majesty that he painted for His Majesty. I have never seen the image that is being held in his hand here. I don't know anyone else who can describe the image to me. Much of what I know about Ras Daniel Heartman comes through Ras Wittedred, who met Heartman at the same art store, the same place where they were buying pencils to do artwork. And Heartman was instructing Wittedred as to the kind of pencils to use, and ultimately shared thoughts about technique. One of the things that Heartman shared with Ras Wittedred at the time was the statement that His Majesty made when presented this portrait that he gave to the king. That statement was, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." That phrase stuck in my mind for a while. And ultimately, I went to the Bible and found it in Matthew 25, verse 23. The verse is actually, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things." And the interpretation of that statement biblically is, this is the statement made by Christ to His faithful servants who had waited faithfully for His return. I can only imagine that the resonance that statement must have had when Heartman repeated it to other brethren and sistren. And I won't elaborate on that, but given the way in which His Majesty was received as Christ coming, as the returned Christ, the language is so powerful, and I think it fits into, it must have fit into the way that Ras Heartman thought about his connection to Africa, to Ethiopia, and to His Majesty, of course. Moving on, this is a photograph of a photograph that I took when I went back to see if I could actually acquire a loan of the portrait, of the placard itself, for the Smithsonian exhibition. By this time, Ras Shadrach had transitioned. He had transitioned sometime, I believe, in the late 90s or early 2000s. This picture, I believe, was taken sometime shortly after the king's visit, possibly as late as the early 70s. I can only identify Shadrach on the right, playing the kete, and the brother on the bass, I think might be Ras Amlak, who is one of his nephews. But the individuals who basically kept custody of the object were all of his nephews. They were the sons of Meshach and Abednego. On the left here is Ras Moses. Here on the right, without a shirt on, is Ras Ja'o. Here on the drum below with the blue ball cap is Amlak, and Wittedred is standing behind Jao. And I don't know this is on the other drum with the light blue cap is another nephew, Ras Eric. I don't know the sister's name or the other brother over here. But I immediately thought when we had the opportunity to do the Rastafari exhibit, the very first thing I thought about, whatever happened to that placard that Ras Shadrach had commissioned from Ras Daniel Heartman, and that was, in my mind, it was perhaps one of the last material objects, but an incredible piece of artwork that materialized the energies of the visit itself, of the state visit itself. What other similar types of objects exist today, I couldn't tell you. But this one is certainly part of the heritage of not only of Daniel Hartman's work, it's not only part of his legacy, but to me, it's actually part of the heritage of the movement itself. And this was what it looked like in place at the Smithsonian in the Africa Hall, mounted. You see to the left of the placard, you see that same blow up of the photograph of Shadrach receiving his medal and Heartman standing behind. And just another shot of the image. This is Ras Iva and Jati, who were among the visitors when the exhibit opened. That's what it looked like when I managed. It took 2 weeks of reasoning to get Brother Moses, Jao, and Amblak to agree to the loan of the object, which we had for 4 years at the Smithsonian. Why I initially wanted to go retrieve it with them, but they said, no, you stay here. And I said to Russ Wittedred, who was with them at the time, I said, whatever you do with it, don't let them wash it down, because I'll have conservators work on this object. We'll do it with like distilled water and whatever the conservators want. So when they returned the object back like this, Witted took me aside and said, yeah, they took a dirty pail of water and washed it down. So I just kind of grinned about that. And then the conservators spent like several gallons of distilled water wiping down the object to clear the haze on it. It brightened up amazingly. And one thing I'll pass on about the object that I experienced for myself, you perhaps can't get it from seeing it in this form. When the conservator was working on the object, she was so taken by the brilliance as she would go over and wipe the surface area down. She was so taken by the brilliance of the eyes. The eyes were one thing that Daniel Heartman had kind of reasoned with and counseled Ras Wittedred on. He said, when you're doing a portrait, the most important thing are the eyes. Focus on the eyes. Well, the conservator, as she was going over the face, she said, Jake, go to any part of the room and the eyes will still be looking at you. You can be straight on, you can be right, left, they're still looking at you. Somehow Heartman had the capacity to, and here we're working in oil here. And not only are we working in oil, the surface area, you cannot tell from this picture, but the surface area is the reverse side of a piece of masonite. It's the stamped side of a piece of masonite, which is finely textured rather than being completely smooth. Somehow that texture on which he painted gave a vibrancy and a depth to the portrait itself, almost a texture that made it alive. And that was part of a brilliance of artwork that I'm not capable of, really dissecting, but I pass that on to you. So that was really the footnote I wanted to talk about. It's unique to me because it's a marker of Ras Daniel Hartman's connection to the Church Triumphant, which was at the time, I believe at the time that this was painted was on Foreshore Road, not too far from a camp that Sam Brown had. Shadrach and Rush, Sam Brown were not too far apart on Foreshore Road. Shadrach later moved to Goldsmith Villa. I don't know if there were any intermediate locations other than that, but it's important as to talk about Ras Daniel Hartman's relationship to the Church Triumphant group that was nested within the larger Nyabingi house. It's important as a particular moment in the visit of His Imperial Majesty. And it's important also because I think it's one of the few things that survive that is a work in oil painted along with all of the pen and paper work that Ras Daniel Hartman did. And I will also, from my own experience, validate the international dimensions of how the extent to which Daniel Hartman's artwork has circulated. In 2017, I was in Benin City, Nigeria, with a group of Smithsonian scholars. We just finished opening an exhibit in the National Museum at Benin City, and they were playing music. And so after a while, I went up to the DJ and I said, "Could we have some reggae music?" And he said, "Sure." He went in the back, and before he started spinning the music, he brought out a canvas, and on that canvas was a reproduction of Prince Emmanuel, the well-known Rasta youth that we've seen multiple images of in these presentations. And he put it in front of the setup, and then he proceeded to play Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and a variety of others. So with that, that's the footnote to Ras Daniel Hartman. Blessed love.
Blessed love. Give thanks for that bit of archival. And the question was asked, where can you say that this piece is now? That was a question that was asked. Where is the piece now?
This piece is now with the nephews at Goldsmith Villa. It was shipped to us from the Institute of Jamaica. When it got to the Smithsonian, it had the conservation done. It was mounted. It was up for 4 years. We sent it back in December of it was either December of 2011 or January of 2012. We sent it back in a completely redone, custom-made, what they call cavity crate. So the thing was actually set in a cavity with foam all around it. And it's, to the best of my knowledge, it's still in that crate, which is its housing at Goldsmith Villa, where Jao and Russ Moses and others live up there.
All right, give thanks. Well preserved, and hopefully in the location that you're suggesting. I see we have a thank you very much, Jakes, for that. I see we have a number of persons who have joined us. I thought I saw Nana Faraika. I'm not sure if she's still here. If she is, welcome and thanks for joining. I was hoping perhaps she may, given the fact that they were age mates somewhat, have had some interaction. Oh, she is still here. Nana Faraika, welcome and thank you. I don't know if you are able to, but any personal connections that you may have had with our honoree tonight? If you do, you're certainly invited to share such with us. And likewise, anyone else who has that something else to add to the story we're seeking to put on record here this evening. Yeah. I see a number of persons. Sister Eleanor, thank you for joining us as well. Always good to see you. I know you were a part of that space at some point in time. I don't know if you two might have something to share. I see Queen Mother, I fear here, give thanks. I see Dr. Dunkley as well. Give thanks for that. I don't know if you came across Heartman in the archives to any extent and have anything that you might wish to share. There is a question which is being asked if there has been an intentional under appreciation for the work or muting of him as a celebrated Jamaican contributor. And the question as to whether the fact that he was early into commerce and you know, was reproducing these things may have invalidated him. I think that there is some understanding that the artist should be poor and, you know, mercifully assisted by persons who celebrate the work, and him having been a pioneer in getting his stuff out there was not into that expression. So I don't know if there are any questions or comments at this point in time, but we thank all of our contributors so far for what they've shared with us, a rich cross-section of different kinds of imperatives, you know, at the heart of it, that this is well-timed, but certainly not enough.
There is a question on YouTube.
Okay, please.
Chris Manuel Alcantara, we have about 34 watching on, a very active chat. So we ask you to just say where you're from and subscribe. Was the end goal Africa or the kingdom of Yah on earth? Did Ras Daniel Heartman see them as being one in the same, or Africa being a pillar or part of the foundation of Yahweh's kingdom? That's, he's apologizing for his randomness, but he's asking that.
I'm not sure which one of our speakers might wish to take that one on.
Well, based on the Rastafari philosophy, Zion is Africa. There are many different ways in which this concept is expressed. And it is expressed a lot in Jamaican popular music and expressed explicitly or implicitly. If you listen to Get Up, Stand Up, for example, by the Wailers, song written by Marley and Tosh, you get that feeling. Some people say, and the song, for example, well, we have Get Up, Stand Up, we have Jimmy Cliff, The Harder They Come, talking about heaven being on earth, and specifically among Rastafari, at least many elements in Rastafari, of Africa generally, Ethiopia specifically, but generally in Africa. And so if you listen to many of the songs as well, that of this repatriation songs, Sata Masagana is one of them. Move Out of Babylon is another. It is expressing this type of way of articulating as well as existing in Africa as a final destination of the redeemed African. So I would say that that is Daniel Hartman's repatriation mission accomplished. It's part of that expression of the idea of heaven and freedom in the context of heaven as the final destination being Africa. And as the final destination of people also getting their share on earth, that justice is to be had on earth, and including the just use of material resources on earth. And not wait until you go to heaven to die and go to heaven in Jesus' name, as is stated in Get Up, Stand Up. Right? Or in Jimmy Cliff, they told us of a pie up in the sky waiting for you when you die, but between now and when you die, nobody seemed to hear you when you cry. So there's a lot of expression in music, in text, and other forms of cultural expression in which this is expressed.
All right, there's a mic open, it seems. Just checking on that. Thanks, Clinton. Sister Farika, is that you? I see your mic is open. Okay. All right. I hear a question. Well, not really a question, a comment that and I suppose it goes back to what Janoy Jaja said, that Hartman commercialized his work because he wanted the poorer people to have access to him and his creativity. That it wasn't just only to be able to sell art, to make a living for himself, but also to circulate his craft. I suppose he was very much intentional in what it is that he was doing. Any more questions for us to address, Sister Colleen?
Not
Ras
that
Jalani.
hasn't been addressed.
Robbie, okay, Ras Robbie, go
Ras
ahead.
Jalani. I wonder if we can just pass over to Sister Monique just to flesh out that comment on Tanzania, and in your book, you kind of contextualize his repatriation in the way in which Tanzania was coming up in the Pan-African world and in the Pan-African sensibility. So I wonder if I could just flesh that out a little bit.
Robbie, you mean in response to the question we just had about how we saw Africa?
Yes, sorry. Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking in response to that question that though Africa in the Rasta imagination can sometimes mean, as Ras Janoi said earlier, that you create Africa in the West somewhere or wherever you are, spiritually or in some physical sense. But for Ras Daniel, it was certainly a physical move to the African continent. And he initially imagined Ethiopia, but when Ras Bupe approached him, said, well, if Jah decided it was another place on the continent, he was fine with accepting that and seizing this particular opportunity. It was also the case that he had decided that he was not going to leave Jamaica unless it was for Africa. And so even Alma in her article talks about, not some confusion about exactly when Not Far Away was done, if it was in the 70s or if it was in the 80s, just before he left. But I certainly think his commitment and his goal, I see Not Far Away as prophetic in that sense, because it's autobiographical, it's a self-portrait, because of what he captures with his own eyes, sort of looking into the distance. So for him, it was definitely a physical move to the continent, which is why I find it so I mean, I guess we could read it a number of different ways. On one hand, it's incredibly sad because he fell ill quite quickly, and it was a very, very difficult process. And the people who were there, who are still alive, find it very hard to talk about it. They were deeply saddened by losing him. And Atto went on to be a pillar of the community that, you know, after Tanzanian people started embracing Rastafari, he became a very, very important part of spiritual instruction. But the goal was to have a council of elders to do that work. And the vision was for Heartman to be, you know, the backbone of that. So we could read it that way, but we could also read it as some sort of, his work was done on multiple levels, and this was his, for lack of a better word, heaven in a sense. And he went and he was home, and that was enough. That was his life. I guess we have to see it that way. But I would, you know, just to wrap up, I would definitely say for him, repatriation, Africa was definitely a move to this physical place and space. Thanks, Robbie.
Monique, I want to, since you mentioned the prophetic nature of that piece in particular, for you, what about that piece, immortality? What does that say about the whole vision as well, or anyone?
Yeah, I mean, you see, I have more questions about immortality than, you know, I got that copy when I was doing the work of immortality and saw it for the first time. I have so many questions about, it makes me think about Afrocentricity as a movement. It makes me think of, in terms of the scholarship, but I wonder what all of this sort of Egyptian motif, what it meant for him as a Rasta man, if he was expanding, and what that meant philosophically. But, you know, we'll never know. So I don't know. I'm still, you know, I'm not an art critic. I don't even feel like I have those talents at all, but I don't, it's so incredibly rich, and I'm dying for people to sit down with it. But I think it really reflects how much he was reading. Atto tells me he also wanted to learn Amharic. So I just think he was, I'm sorry he didn't live longer, because I think that engagement with ancient Egypt was really important. And I always have questions about how much he would have held in terms of getting into the African reality, African religions that some Rasta people reject, right? I'm wondering how he would have sort of either incorporated those, what he would have thought of those, being on the continent, because that was a transition for everybody involved. Sort of confronting the real Africa as opposed to what we imagine or think we know in a diasporic context. So yeah, Jelani, I don't know, you might have a better read of immortality than I, because I mean, there's a Rasta man at the center. So I don't know if he's just pulling from all of these different influences and saying he owns them all, but I don't know.
It was in relation to your notion of his work being done, and that being a piece that it comes towards the end of his life, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's all of that reading, all of that takes place. Those pieces were done just before he left Jamaica. Those were done in the 80s. I actually thought initially that he did that in Tanzania, but he didn't do anything in Tanzania.
Okay. I see Verley in camera. Do you have some comments on that piece in particular, Verley, yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I think it's a stunning work, you know, and I think that side of his work really needs to be appreciated. I mean, those works that I saw in that private collection too, they're absolutely amazing, you know. Not that the rest of the work is not amazing, but it just deepens the understanding of his work. But when I first saw the title, I also had to wonder, you know, was he already aware of his mortality in some way? I mean, is there something, you spoke about the prophetic nature of his work. I mean, is there something that caused him to reflect on those issues, and that may have caused him, perhaps somebody around him? I mean, you know, it may not necessarily have been about him himself, but I think there is a reflection there about life, death, transcendence, immortality, what it means in a Pan-African context, what it means in an African repatriation context. So if I would have to read that work, if I would have to analyze the iconography, I would definitely want to look in that direction, you know.
And he has wings in it. He has
Right,
wings. So
right.
the angel piece of it, he probably had a vibe, probably knew
Right.
the time was running out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That certainly all of these interpretations can be put to it and should be fleshed out and discussed. And of course, discuss along with the fact that this tradition that is expressed in these paintings has been a tradition in African diaspora art and philosophy for the longest time. 17th century Africans in enslavement coming through the century really did pay attention to Egyptian, the role of Egypt in the making of civilization, including the role of philosophy and art and so on. So if you go back to people like Frederick Douglass, who was 19th century, but even and before that, and in the 20th century, persons like George James, the Guyanese, who wrote Stolen Legacy. So there's a lot. John Willis Maynard, who lived in Jamaica for a while, married to a Jamaican, and was part of the Paul Bogle movement, and actually was arrested during the Morant Bay uprising, arrested by the colonial authorities, and so on. So there's that tradition, and so being aware of that tradition and the role that it played in shaping of identity in the African diaspora, but also in the shaping of its politics, in the shaping of sovereignty, and so on. It's very important to add that to what we know and the issues that you raised there, you know, just
and to add to that, Clinton, that is also not new to Rasta if you think about the role of metaphysics and astrology in the 12 tribes, for example, right?
Precisely.
The man was incorporating that, you know, from much earlier. So it's not by any means a shocking, I mean, Black people of African descent have been combining all sorts of traditions forever.
Yes, and in fact, the role of Marcus Garvey in the figuring or the founding or an inspiration to the founding of Rastafari. Garvey was pretty much into Egyptian history, Egyptian art, and it's expressed in Garvey's work. Even the Negro World, the newspaper, the masthead for that paper is the Sphinx, that big iconic Sphinx that we know of. There are several smaller ones, but the big one that we know of. So that, and because of the role of Garvey in such, and the respect shown to Garvey within Rastafari, all of these things would be part of how we come to a conclusion in relation to Ras Daniel Heartman and his work in those pieces that Verily described.
All right. Okay.
To the chair, Razelani.
Please go ahead, Raseko.
Yes, I want to add to what Tintin was just saying in terms of Garvey influence, because the red, black, and green flag is something used in Kemet, Egypt, old Egypt, over 10,000 years ago. So I just wanted to make mention of that.
You love Raseko.
Give thanks. Yeah. If there are any further comments from the audience, this is the time that we probably would, in terms of questions that you might want to pose or whatever. Otherwise,
Ras Jelani, Brady, I'm sorry, man. One more question to Sister Amma. I just wanted to get Sister Amma's sense about. So you showed a picture of Akala and all this young generation now, right? What kind of knowledge do they have of Ras Daniel Heartman? Do they have a knowledge of it, or do they just know the iconography? I'm just interested. Thanks.
I don't know Brother Akala personally. So I don't know how extensive his knowledge is. I know they know the iconography. It's true when I mentioned the name Ras Daniel to just people in general, they're sort of puzzled, not sure. I just have to show one image. It almost doesn't matter which image it is. And they go, oh, okay. And everyone has a story about how they come to know Ras Daniel. Some image that was in their home growing up or in someone else's home that they visited, somewhere that they went and they saw the image and immediately connected with it. So I have the sense that for a lot of this generation, people born more or less since Ras Daniel has passed on, it's the imagery, it's the iconography that endures for them. So the name of the person might not be as prevalent, but there's a recognition, there's an understanding that there's a body of work, and there's also, I feel, a deep respect for his work. Everyone has an individual story about why Ras Daniel is of particular relevance to them, why they feel connected to his imagery. And so if I knew Akala and his brethren, I would ask them. But short of asking them, I think what people know is the work, and they respond to the work almost immediately.
All right, give thanks, Sister Amma. That survey was a nice application of the material aspects of his iconography and the images with different ways that people celebrate, including in dress and clothing. Yeah. We've more or less gone through all of those presentations that we expected to share. And I'm not sure if Atto is here, but we certainly want to thank Atto for what he has done. It's a conversation I was having with him sometime last year, and he mentioned it would have been his father's 80th anniversary, and that his own project was still not ready for publication, but we thought nonetheless we could pause to help in whichever way to bring that urgency around this work to light. I think that these conversations at least reintroduces the artist who we know as Ras Daniel Heartman into our cyber culture, cyber consciousness. And hopefully, based on all of the networking I've seen happening in the chat, we can certainly press on with something tangible in short order. I want to thank all of our speakers. I don't know if there are any summary comments. Perhaps I should ask you just to, leave us each with your specific charge as you see it, given what we now know and what we would like to see. Perhaps we will go in the order that we came. So, Professor Hutton, you want to start?
Yeah, well, briefly, I think that we have had enough insights and suggestions to go further into a project that will have, as Verily indicated, a retrospective but importantly as well, a publication of substance, a publication that is thick, that we have different participants writing on different aspects of Ras Daniel Heartman, the spiritual, the cultural, the philosophical, depicted by the imagery, his connections with the world of Rastafari, especially those close to him, Janai, and so on. That we should seek to do this. We should get a mandate here to do this. So that generations of Jamaicans and people outside of Jamaica can have a better understanding of this person and his contribution to the development of the type of humanism that we strive to have. But certainly, we should teach about this man in our schools, and we can't do it if we don't have the materials, right? We really need to bring some coherence to materials with text. So this is what I would
give thanks, Clinton. Next, I would ask Sister Burley. You've kind of given us a charge before, but
right. Yeah, so I think it needs to be done, and I'm very excited and I'm very encouraged by everything that I've heard here, and just want to say that I'm happy to contribute to that, to support it in whatever way I can. I've learned a lot, and I really want to learn more. I really want to understand those intricate drawings from the 1980s in particular. So I will be pestering the collector who has not been responding to my emails, so that I can really look at those works more closely and see if there something can be done. And as I said, whatever way I can help, I'll be happy to do so.
All right, give thanks.
And thanks for having me. Right.
Thanks again. Sister Amma.
I think one of the reasons that Ras Daniel really resonates with ordinary people, ordinary Black people, and it doesn't matter where they are, is that his work is unapologetically Black. He's portraying just a Black subject in its essence. And I think that's something that perhaps the institutions at the time didn't necessarily gravitate to. And I think that there is something different about some of the artists that have been accepted, who may have come from a different spiritual tradition, that I think the Rastafari element is something that is confrontational, that is, as I say, unapologetic, and at the same time transcendent, and it has this quality. So I think that's one of the reasons that he was never really embraced by the institutions, but it's also one of the reasons that he's had such a wide appeal, that aesthetically he captures something that Black people really relate to. And whether they're Rasta or not, but he captures something. So I'm thrilled to hear that more scholarship is going to be done on Ras Daniel, and I'll be listening and listening out to see what happens next.
All right, thank you, Sister Amma. I don't know if Ras Daniel is here, perhaps not. But we move to Sister Monique to iterate. Yeah.
I think I think everybody sort of captured what I've been thinking, but Ahmed just said something that made me think about how I guess we in many ways we've all made comments that speak to the idea of Ras Daniel Hartman being unsung in some ways, and being erased or unrecognized. And it's interesting because in a sort of establishment context he is, but is he really if the people on the ground have loved him so much? And I'm interested in sort of teasing that out, the reasons, but also the fact that all of the probably millions of people who have loved his work for so long also represent an archive that we have to tap, to understand truly what resonates with people so profoundly, and now moving on to current generations as well. And then I'll say I'm looking forward particularly to what art historians will say, because I don't have those skills. And I'm really interested in sort of incorporating whatever they have to say into the work that I can do as a historian in terms of framing his legacy. But thank you. I've learned so much this evening, and I'm happy to have been a part of this. So thank you, Jelani.
You know, Monique, the point you made just now about the popular celebration of Ras Daniel Hartman and just a reflection on immortality, it's almost akin to Bob Marley's "You Got Tired to See My Face," you know, that he already has achieved a certain durability in the Black art, Rastafari art consciousness. And you know, so he's made his mark, and yeah, we are to catch up really, and hopefully we will catch up, because I think it's an important institutional legacy that we're seeking to ensure moving forward. I want to wrap up by thanking again our panel. Oh, I think Ras Daniel is here. Is it that?
Yes,
Yes,
I'm
please,
here.
your final words. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you were still with us.
My final word is just to give thanks to everyone who has made this happen. And I look forward to dealing with more of this as we go along. Thanks, everyone. As I said, Heartman, I met Heartman in a very early stage of my development within Rastafari culture, because I needed to find the right people. He was one of the right people. My studio, well, in fact, my studio that I had on Oxford Road, gallery, it was a gallery studio. Heartman, that's why Heartman was there most of the time. He could do his work, a lot of his work, and do it at a certain level. And he brought out a lot in the ones who were around us, around me, and me, myself. I am eternally grateful for him. And thanks to all of you for putting on this talk. Thanks again. More love, blessings, and guidance to all. God bless. One love, Rastafari.
Give thanks, give
Yes.
thanks, give thanks. Is it yes, please, Monique.
I just forgot to tell you, you asked a question about the name Heartman. I learned from Ansel that when it was Church Triumphant, among that group, that they that he decided to change his name because they recognized his work as inspirational, and that he defined Hartman as man of the heart. And he consciously took the name because of that association and what they told him about how people responded to his work.
And
give thanks for that, Monique.
To put on just one little thing, just to remember that piece of work that he did for me, his whole thing was about the lion. He named it Lion Heart because it was a heart, a dissection of the heart itself, and the image was inside of it. So you can see where his head was at, you know, and it was heartical. That's what he was all about. He was a heartical person. So the name was just his. He owned it.
It seems as though we could rightfully say he had become genuinely Daniel in the lion's den, as depicted also in one of his self-portraits. The real life Rastafari Daniel, that humble, loved, faithful servant that trod unhurt in circumstances that people would otherwise be fearful. There's so much more. I guess we've not talked any about his appearance in film, and why he would have been so iconographed. Brother Miguel Lorne at one point had shared two crowns that were given to him by Ras Daniel Heartman, which would become a very different and also unique dimension to his artistry as well. The various personal episodes, some of which we had hoped would have been shared here, and some of which have been shared here. I trust that Atto and the Daniel Heartman Foundation know that all of the ones who have participated here are faithful family and certainly more than responsive when called on to help to bring attention in whichever way he would like to what he's doing, and what we can do to support that. I don't think that also takes from our own efforts in our own way to bring support to that in whichever way. I think retrospective would be a nice way of getting to some of those things that Verly mentioned, those very private, unknown things, and helping to inspire a sharing of those things that are so prolific. I want to thank you again. My lighting is failing me, so I think I've said enough. But once more than much appreciative, all of you remember Heartman indeed on his Earth Strong, which comes up later on this week on the 18th. But I think that this is a wonderful start to the 81st year, and nothing before its time. It has happened. Let's see what happens next year, if bigger or better things might be in store. Perhaps we might be able to tell you of that retrospective and the progress we've made from this year. Once more, thanks again, all, Verly, Monique, Amma, Janoy, Clinton, Jakes, for those wonderful factoids, and more importantly, the persons for whom we do this, our audiences. Thank you for taking this time to be with us, and to show appreciation for that which has been offered to you again. We're going to go out with the Prince of Reggae, who's also a contemporary, one of those Rastafari revolutionaries that has been framed and exampled here through Heartman. One Perfect Love from me, Jelani, on behalf of the School of Sacrament, Institute of Caribbean Studies, Edna Manley College. It has been our honor to celebrate this Rastafari genius.
There's plenty of land for you and I. Baba made our way to Shashamani land, riding on the King's Highway to the promised land, going to the promised land. Oh gosh, to the promised land. Oh, to the promised land. Well, there's plenty of land for you and I, by and by. Lots of food to share for everyone. No time for segregation in the promised land. Oh gosh, take me to the promised land. It's the promised land, oh, that's the promised land. Oh, 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 yeah. Said we're riding on the King's Highway from Cairo to Kenya. Made a stop in Asmara, then we made another one in Addis Ababa. The promised land, going to the promised land. Oh gosh, save the promised land. Yeah, I'm the promised land. Oh, then I said to myself, give a thanks for the prophet God, for he gave me the teaching so I could see the reality